Hello, my name's Rob. I'm part of the Portishead Church of England clergy team, and welcome to our thought for this week. Tucked away in the back of our Bibles, after 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus, and before the letter to the Hebrews, lies one of the shortest books in the Bible. It's just one chapter long, and in my Bible it just takes a page, and it's a book called Philemon. It's not a book I'm not going to read it to us now, because it's a little bit too long for that actually, but it is short, and I suggest you might like to go and read it for yourself. But it's the reading that is set for today comes from the book of Philemon. And so I thought I might just say a little bit about it. Now, Philemon is a letter. It's a letter written by Paul to Philemon. And we think that Philemon lived in Colossae. What we do know is that Philemon had a slave called Onesimus. And it seems that Paul had gone Paul had gone and stayed with Philemon, and while he was there he'd met this slave Onesimus, and he'd spoken to him and obviously talked to him about Jesus, and Onesimus was rather taken with this. And so after Paul left, Onesimus ran away, and he went and found Paul, and he came to faith. Now that put Paul in a rather difficult position, because here he had an escaped slave who belonged to a friend of his and a fellow disciple, this man Philemon. And what he did was he sent Onesimus back to Colossae, carrying the letter that we now call the letter to the Colossians, and also a letter for Philemon. Now, in those little things that you can work out if you read through the New Testament carefully, we presume that the letter had effect, because we have not just the letter to the Colossians in our Bibles, but also the letter written to Philemon. And what Paul said to Philemon was something around this. He said, I can't order you to do anything, but what I can do is help you to look at this situation through the lens of faith, through the lens of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And through that lens, it looks a little bit like this: that your slave, Onesimus, is now not just your slave, but he is a fellow disciple. And because he is a fellow disciple, I'm urging you to take him back, and to recognize that he is no longer your slave, but your brother. It's interesting that the word Onesimus actually means useful, and there's a little play on words in there, because Paul says, well, he was useless, he wasn't a very good slave, was he? But now he's useful. Now he is useful to you. His status is transformed. Now, I don't know how we feel about that. We may feel a little bit uncomfortable about it. We probably do, because we think, well, slavery is a bad thing. Why was Paul in any way sanctioning its existence, which he seems to have been? And it's a good question. But Paul was recognizing what he had the ability to do. He couldn't challenge the very existence of slavery in the Roman Empire, in this very new stage of the church. But he could address one individual and address one situation and say, here, why don't you look at this in this way? What does it mean to address this issue as a Christian? And when we look at things like that, then we're no longer powerless to change things, but we have the ability to change something. And for Philemon, it was the ability to change the standing of this one individual. And interestingly, hundreds of years later, during the anti-slavery campaigns in the late 18th century, this book was used by the anti-slavery campaigners, and they commissioned a piece of pottery by Josiah Wedgwood, and on it had a kneeling man with his hands in chains and the words, "Am I not a man and a brother?" written across it. So the words that Paul used here actually became instrumental in removing slavery and the slave trade in the British Empire. But that's a slightly different story. So we may feel unsettled, we may feel that we wish that Paul had done more, and if we're of African or Caribbean heritage, we may particularly feel that, and that's right and fair and proper. But I think what we do see here is Paul addressing an issue and saying, change what you can change, make a difference where you can make a difference. That as we look around the world, we may see all the injustice that's there, we may see all the things that are wrong, and there are many things that are wrong. But the little book of Philemon reminds us that actually we have the power to do something. We haven't got the power individually to stop climate change, but we do have the power to change the way that we live a bit and make a difference. We don't have the power to end conflict in the Middle East or in Ukraine, but we do have the ability to write letters, to campaign, to raise money, to stand up and say, actually this is wrong. And that's what we're called to do as Christians, in the faith and the hope that the little things that we do, the things that won't affect everybody but they might affect just somebody, really can make a difference to the world that we live in, and show that we are people of faith, that we are followers of Jesus, and we believe that the world might just be different. So why don't you go away and read the book of Philemon and allow God to challenge you to say, what is it that you can make a difference to in the world, but particularly in the place where you live. God bless you.